then they can head on down there. Guys, we are so very, very glad to have everyone here with us today. My name is Beth, and I'm the pastor here at Clarksburg Church. And we are beginning our Advent season, and I know it's before Thanksgiving, and we're kind of a week early, but here's the deal. I couldn't wait. I was so excited about Christmas, and so excited about Advent, and so excited about the good news of Jesus that I could not wait. Wanted to take a quick poll. Who already has Christmas decorations up? I know Mario does. Yes? Okay, good. We got a couple people with Christmas decorations up. How many of you wait until next weekend? How many of you wait sometime after that? And how many of you will just never do it? Okay, all right, good. We got one. All right, so in the Advent season, as we journey closer to Christmas, we are actually looking for the gospel, looking for the good news of Jesus in the familiarity of the Christmas carols. Now, oftentimes, these are songs that we've grown up with and we know the words to, or at least we know enough of them to fake it and pretend that we know the words, but many of them are so familiar, and like familiar things, we kind of just like lose track of what it really means. We lose track of what they're really talking about in the familiarity. And my hope is that by looking at them again in this season, we're sort of going to unearth the beauty and the gospel message of each of these carols. My hope is that as you hear them, as you're going through your day, as you're going shopping, as you hear them on the radio, as you're cooking or baking or whatever, when we sing them in the service together, they might carry sort of this fresh meaning that would allow the good news of Jesus to wash over you again, wherever it is that you hear them. Today we're going to talk about the song that we just sang, O Come, Emmanuel. And what always seems ironic to me about this as a Christmas carol is that there's actually no mention of the nativity. There's no holy night, there's no donkeys, there's no kings, there's no angels, there's no shepherds. And although Alicia and the band did a great job of like pepping up this song, if you listen to the original sort of melody as it is often performed, the original tune is actually not particularly cheery. In fact, if it reminds you of a funeral dirge, that's not far off. In the 15th century, it was actually the melody that was used as a processional chant for burial. So yes, you're right, funeral dirge for sure. Even the lyrics in the verses are actually quite gloomy. We're going to look at them now. There are many versions of these verses, many versions of these songs that have been written and rewritten and rewritten. And this is just the version that we read today. If you look at some of the other ones, you'll see, wow, those are super gloomy. These are probably the least gloomy versions of them. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears. The lyrics are sort of this cry for God to come near to the people of God who are stuck in bondage. They need to be set free. They're mourning. They're grieving in a land that's not their own, in a place that is far from what is familiar, far from what they thought it would be. And they continue in this dark, desolate exile place until God comes and does something about it. And the next verse, O come, thou dayspring, come and cheer. Our spirits of thine advent here disperse the gloomy clouds of night and death's dark shadows put to flight. Come from heaven and sort of give us joy by coming close to us. Chase away all of the storm clouds that have gathered and all of the shadows that indicate death, like chase it all away. O come, desires of nations bind, in one heart of all mankind. Bid thou our sad division cease, and be thyself our kingdom of peace. It's sort of this thing of come, stop the nations from fighting, stop all of these wars, create a new way for us as all mankind to have unity, to have rest, to have peace on earth as it is in heaven. Bring us this peace. Now there, again, like I said, there's more verses, and one is more gloomy than the next, but all of them are sort of naming this reality of Israel's bondage, of the people, of humanity's mourning, of the stuckness of the people of God. That without a Savior, we all are here without hope and without a prayer. And so out of this dirge, this funeral dirge that we sing, comes this pinprick of hope in the chorus. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel, God with us. Now, I don't know what your Thanksgiving traditions are, but in our family, we typically go to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. And my mom has had this Thanksgiving tradition since I was very, very young. Right before the meal begins, there is a little basket, and it is the traditional iconic basket that we have used since I was like 6, right? We were a military family, so this basket moved with us, move after move after move after move, and it probably has the same dried out corn kernels that it did when I was 10, right? And as you go around, you pass around this basket and you get a little corn kernel. And then when the basket comes around the second time, each person is to drop their corn kernel in the basket and say the thing that they are thankful for. Now, as me and my siblings have grown older, we will do the little kids first, and they'll say, like, I'm thankful for my puppy. I'm thankful for my G.I. Joe, whatever the thing is that they want to say thankful for. And then we get to the adults, and then it gets serious. Like at first, the adults are thanking themselves, thanking for jobs, for a house. I'm thankful for security. I'm thankful for the tangible blessings that they've experienced this past year. But then, every time, there's like a pause, a big gulp, and then they move into the next section of their thankfulness, which is where the waterworks really begin to flow. And it's where they start talking about the people in their life. They start talking about the people who have shown up for them, who have loved them, who have been with them through joys and challenges of this past year, and like tears streaming, everyone. Like it's just ugly. It's ugly in a good way. Now, if you have these types of relationships in your life where people have shown up for you in these different ways, you know that they are often the thing that you are most grateful for. And if you do not have these relationships in your life, they are the thing that you want more than anything else. To have people in your life that love you, that care for you, that show up for you, that help you know that you are not alone. I remember several years ago, one of my daughters wanted to put together some goodie bags for her friends at school. It was her birthday, and she wanted to get little trinkets and little candies so that she could celebrate with all of her friends. And so I ordered something on Amazon, and we were just putting the goodie bags together. And guys, I'm going to be honest, I had like 10,000 things on my to-do list, and this was just one of them. And so I'm like, okay, you ready to do the goodie bags? Let's go, let's go. I'm like, assembly line, one of each of the things in the goodie bags. Let's go, let's go. I'm trying to get it done as fast as possible, and all of a sudden she yells at me and puts her hands over everything and says, "Stop! Why are you doing it like that?" And I was like, because I've got 700 things to get done, and this is just one of them. Like, let's move. We can do this fast. Do it with purpose. And she was so annoyed with me and so upset. And she said, "I just want to be with you while we do this. And you just want to get it done." And she was like in 4th grade. And I was like, right to the heart. I wanted to get the task complete, and she wanted to just be with me. Sometimes we're so addicted to progress and accomplishment that the power of just being with someone often gets truncated. That there's really, really, really something about being with people, about being with each other, knowing that we aren't alone, that changes everything without changing anything. In seminary, we actually learned that this was called the ministry of presence. It's this idea that the greatest act of ministry that you can often do is to just show up for another person through physical proximity. Sometimes it looks like sitting next to somebody in silence, holding space for them while a loved one passes into the next life, or while they grieve a diagnosis, or they process through a new future reality that they never expected, or they suffer the pain from illness or depression. And to be honest, it is one of the hardest things to do for another person. It's sort of this process of letting yourself enter into the vulnerability and powerlessness of the other person. to become vulnerable and powerless as well as you sit with them, to just be with them. It requires this ability to stay present in discomfort amid anxiety or fear, oftentimes without the ability to change anything or fix any of the circumstances. And so what I want to do before we move forward from here is I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like, what that has looked like for you before. Now, I know some of you are like, wait, what do you mean talk about it? Like what? We don't have to talk. This is a sit and listen sort of thing, right? Well, here at Clarksburg Church, one of the things that we practice doing a lot is having conversations with each other. We believe that this is how we strengthen the body of Christ, and we know that it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but we look for ways to become stronger as the body, and we believe that that has to do with getting to know one another a bit. So what is going to happen in this next moment is we're going to have a little bit of a conversation with the people right around you. And I want to encourage you in a group of 3 or 4 people that doesn't just include the people that you drove here with, to welcome one another, share your name, and then to share, has anyone ever done this, been with you? Has anybody ever done this for you? Has anybody ever sat with you as you've had to process through something, as you've had to grieve something? Or have you ever done that for someone else? And just share a little bit about that. So again, what you're going to do, you're going to turn to the people around you. It's going to include not just the people you drove with. You're going to introduce yourself to the people, and then you're going to talk about this. Before you begin talking about it, you're going to look to your right. You're going to look to your left. You're going to look to in front of you and behind you and make sure that no one has been left out of a conversation, because in the family of God, at the table of God, no one gets left out. And so we practice this here. All right, everybody understand what we're doing? All right, talk to the people around you. Talk about this. All right, 1 more minute. All right, let's go ahead and bring it back, whole group. Awesome. See, we made it through. Good job, guys. There is certainly power in having another person be with you. And with that in mind, I want us to look at the revelation of Jesus as Emmanuel, as God with us, that we're told about in Matthew chapter 1. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, it starts this way. This is how the birth of Jesus came about. His mother, Mary, was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. I mean, this is an intense 2 verses. And we have really sanitized this over the years as we've looked at this story. But imagine for a second how terrifying, how absolutely terrifying this circumstance would have been. We like to highlight Mary as sort of the chosen one who found favor with God, but really imagine what the days and weeks and months and even years would have looked like. It must have felt like everything was just falling apart. I mean, you're a teenage Jewish girl, and a few months ago you found out that you were spontaneously pregnant. And you're and at that time, unwed pregnancy would have been a plan ruiner, a reputation ender, if not a life ender. And your fiance, who your family likely has had an arrangement with for years, knows that the baby wasn't his. And he's likely assuming that the baby is somebody else's because, let's just say, spontaneous pregnancies don't just happen. It would have been as ridiculous back then as it is today. And so he's going to secretly divorce you, which is actually kind of a kind and decent thing to do, considering that doing so publicly would have meant complete humiliation to her family and disowned by her family and disowned by her society, and it could have even meant that she was killed. But then in verse 20, we're told that when Joseph had considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child who has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. But then, in a dream, Joseph is somehow told by an angel, like, whatever you plan to do, don't do that. Don't do that. And so he's like, okay. This week just keeps getting worse and worse for him. And there's, I'm sure, endless questions in his heart and in his mind. He doesn't know what's supposed to happen next or how this is all supposed to work. And it's in that context that Matthew reveals Jesus as the one who is with us, with them, with him. In verse 22, it says, now all this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with a child and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, think about this for a second. What that means, God with us, is that God has climbed off of his throne in heaven to be with us. The God of heaven has left glory and impenetrability to make himself killable, vulnerable, to be with us. God entered into weakness and powerlessness to be with us. God will do anything to be with us, anytime, any place. It means that the almighty creator of heaven and earth now grows bones that ache like yours and mine. That the God who hovered over the chaos waters at the beginning of time now folds himself into amniotic fluid. That the same God who walked in the cool of the garden at the beginning has now come near. That the same God who led his people in a pillar of fire and cloud so that they wouldn't wander alone is now with us. That the same God who drew close to Job as a whirlwind and a tornado and a hurricane is now with us. That the same God who covenanted with Abraham as a smoking firepot furnace, who tabernacled in fiery glory in the Holy of Holies, has now packed himself into the flesh of a baby, simply because out of love, God longed to draw near, to be with us. And the vulnerability and powerlessness that it took to sit in circumstances and be unable to change them is about to get really, really real. A few months go by, and all of a sudden, Mary and Joseph get this notice that over in Rome, these politicians have decided that they're going to raise taxes again. And the big bad Roman Empire, they've militarized the whole ancestral homeland for the past 50 years, and all of a sudden, you're like midway into your pregnancy. And now you have to go 80 miles on foot or on a donkey somehow south to your husband's homeland, so that he can register for the census, so that they can take more money from your family. So you go, but you never imagined that you wouldn't be coming back to your hometown for years. It would be tempting in that moment to think that God has abandoned you, but then you remember, no, God is with us. I carry him in my belly. And then while on your trip, you give birth as a young mom for the first time. And you're not with anyone you know. You are not in a familiar place. You don't have your mom. You don't have your aunts. You don't have your sisters. And all of the people that are supposed to be with you are not with you. You're with your husband's big, weird, extended family that is awkward, all in of its own. And it's in that place that you give birth. And it's new and it's different. And that would be traumatic in and of itself. But then it gets even worse. Soon after you have this baby boy, all of a sudden there's these messengers that come, that there are Roman soldiers that are coming from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And there is a price on your baby's head. They're going to kill your baby. And they are on their way right now. So by night you have to flee to Egypt, where your ancestors were slaves. And you might be tempted in that moment to wonder, okay, where is God? Has his purposes been thwarted? But then you're reminded, no, God is with me. He lies next to me in the night as I nurse him. There was a large community of Jews that were down in Egypt. And so in the middle of the night, as a new mom, you begin the 300-mile trek through the desert of Israel, through the deserts of Egypt to flee for your life. And as you head down the road, you begin to hear rumors on this month-long journey what Herod and the soldiers did after you left Bethlehem. They massacred all the other people's babies' boys. Based on the archaeological findings in Bethlehem, it was probably a population of about 2,000 people, which means that the number of baby boys within the age range that we're told would have been between 25 and 50 babies massacred. And that's haunting you as you arrive in Egypt. And you're raising your son in this place that you never would have chosen, where you don't know anybody, and it's a new and foreign land. And that's the context in which you are raising a toddler. And somewhere in one of those 3-year periods, you finally catch a break. And you hear that the big bad king who made all of that happen has now died. And you head back to your husband's hometown, where you're going to put down some roots. And all of a sudden you realize that the big bad king's son is actually now on the throne, and Bethlehem's not safe either. And so after that 300-mile, you need to make another 80-mile journey. And in the back of your mind, the question pops up again, God, why is this happening? Are you even here? Where are you? Have you abandoned me? But then you see this little boy playing nearby, and it reminds you, there's God. I am always with you. I'm right here in the middle of the danger and the terror and the fear. And so you end up doing another 80 miles after the 300-mile trek that you've already done. You head back north again to your podunk, no-name hill country town that you came from, where people hear that Mary has returned and the rumor mill starts churning about your mysterious pregnancy and it will continue to turn for decades to come, as we read about later in the gospel. So that's your life. For 3 or 4 years, that has been your life. How do you feel about your life? I mean, if we're honest, that's horrifying, right? Like, I know that in this room, there are stories of real hardships that people have struggled, and people in our community have had really difficult life circumstances. But I dare say that there are few that can hold a candle to what this family has experienced. And so imagine for just a second that the prayers that you have been praying as you escape into the night desert with your infant. And imagine the questions that have risen to the surface as you are trying to raise this child. They're probably the same questions that you and I often raise in the middle of tragedy, in the middle of terror, in the middle of disappointment and loss. Where are you, God? Have you abandoned me? Where is God in moments like these? And Matthew wants us to know that from the very beginning of this story, where God is in the middle of our terrors and our tragedies, when life is disappointing us and the dreams that we had have not come true. Matthew wants us to know God is with us. He's with us. He's with us actually in a really strange way. He's with us by becoming subject to all of the terrors, all of the tragedies, all of the disappointments that you and I experience. Jesus' life was actually in some ways kind of a disappointment from one perspective. I honestly doubt that at the end of Jesus' life, when he's kneeling in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's crying, that in that moment he feels like, gosh, all my wildest dreams have come true. This has been the best. No. Who is this God that is revealed in Jesus? He is this God who redeems and saves, but not by making all of our wildest dreams come true. In the story of the scriptures, the world is the way that it is because God has actually granted us a huge deal of freedom, and we've taken that freedom and we've been destructive with it. We've often used it to create a world that is hell on earth. And now God is going to redeem and save it by becoming a part of this world that we have destroyed. He's going to become a baby to utterly terrified parents who have to run for their lives. He's going to be born in a place where no one thought anything good could come from. He's going to be the complete underdog, despised and afflicted, poor and powerless. But in reality, the prophets have pointed for centuries saying that that is precisely where God is at work. At the lowest moments where you think God is totally absent, the story of Jesus invites us to see it. Jesus in the middle of those dead-end stories, in the tragedies and the terrors, that is where Emmanuel is. And what Jesus comes to do is not solve everybody's problems. Jesus shows up in Mary and Joseph's life, and everything actually gets worse. I mean, he's born with a price on his head, and he dies with a price on his head. And the only moment that changes everything is what actually happens at the very end, which is Jesus' resurrection from the dead. And that God, who has identified with our disappointments and all of our tragedies, Jesus has journeyed with us, right alongside us through all of that. And it forces us, as it forced Jesus, as he kneeled in the garden, to just be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And so come, Emmanuel, and rescue captive Israel. And Jesus' prayers were not answered that night. He actually ended up on the cross. And the only thing that keeps all of this from being just a terrible, terrible tragedy is the moment of hope and resurrection from the dead. That Jesus is the one human being whose life was just as tragic as ours. And because of his utter love and commitment to preserving this good world, in God's love, Jesus was raised from the dead to give us hope that the sin and the evil and the disappointment that fills our lives and our world didn't get the last word. But it doesn't mean that all of our wildest dreams will come true. It means that we live in a world that is groaning. And like Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, that God is groaning right alongside us. And we have hope in the resurrection from the dead, that we have hope in a new creation that is coming. And so I know that that's like deeply theological, and so some of you are like, I don't know what we're talking about anymore. But it's also super practical. I know that there are people in this room that are struggling with sickness, struggling with anxiety, struggling with depression, struggling with job loss, family conflict, all sorts of different things. Struggling living in a world that looks like our world does and wondering what is happening. Struggling to believe that Jesus is good. Struggling to believe that Jesus is even real because, look how life is turning out. And the good news is that Matthew and this Christmas carol is announcing that Jesus is actually suffering right alongside you. And it allows you to lock arms with him, to hold him through the night, to see him sit right next to you on this dangerous journey, because he is the one who went through death and was raised to new life and has hope on the other side. Now, clearly this statement does not mean that life is going to be easy or that we're going to be spared from trials. Instead, it means that in every trial, there is this gift of God himself wrapped in flesh. That we are given as much of him as we want, fill to the full. And this is why the carol says, oh, come, Emmanuel. And then it goes to the refrain, rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel. God is with us. We rejoice not because life is easy. We rejoice because God is with us. Because God has wrapped himself in flesh and he has given himself in all of his love, in all of his patience, in all of his perseverance, all of his kindness, all of his peace, his grace, his mercy, his abundance. He says, here, it's yours. Rejoice. Rejoice. So now that we've unpacked the good news of this carol, we're going to sing it again. But this time we're going to add a few more verses. On the white table around the room, there's a little Post-it note. And I'm going to invite you to grab one of those Post-it notes and a pen and to pass them around. You can go ahead and do that now. And on that Post-it note, I'm going to invite you to write your own verse to this song. Now, it does not have to be fancy. You don't have to do iambic pentameter. I don't think I said that right. You don't have to follow the same cadence or syllables. It can be a word. It can be a phrase. It can be whatever it is that you would like. But what I want you to do is I want you to write the situation that you're experiencing where you need God to minister to you with his presence. Where do you need to experience Emmanuel? And I'm going to invite you to just write that on that Post-it. Now, once you're done writing it, you can hold on to that Post-it, and that can just be yours, and you can sing that silently in your heart, and you don't have to share that with anybody. But if you would like to, we have a basket up here. And don't put your name on it or anything like that, but we have a basket up here. And as we sing this next song, we're going to read those experiences. We're going to read them so together we can experience the be withness of some of the places where we need God to be Emmanuel. And then together we are going to sing, rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel. All right, so take a second. Write down your word or your phrase. Write down your word or your phrase. And if you'd like to, you can drop it in the basket here. This is the good news of Christmas, that whatever your situation, you can rejoice because God has come near. Some of us can rejoice because we know what it means for God to be with us. We've experienced the salvation that Christ brings. He's met us through health restored, through relationships reconciled, through hope renewed. And so as we sing this and we go through these situations that people are facing, we can respond with this deep, guttural rejoice. And others of us are waiting in anticipation for God to come be with us to save us. And we can sing emphasizing the prayer and the pleading for God to come so we might rejoice.
Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Emmanuel, be with us as we raise our daughter.
Emmanuel, be with us as we walk through work.
Emmanuel, be with us with big life changes and figuring out all of the things.
With friends and health, mentally and spiritually.
Be with us on our first Christmas for my family after the death of Mom.
Patience and instruction.
Healing strength to witness for him.
Family conflicts.
I need to experience Emmanuel in my financial life and with my family.
Oh, come and give me peace, Emmanuel.
Help me to minister to my family so they can know you.
Healthy work-life balance.
Job uncertainty.
Study, singles, mom. God, draw me close to you.
God, draw me close to you and put my future in your hands.
Healing from anxiety.
Love, Allie.
O come, Emmanuel, and minister to finances and health.
The loneliness of a flailing marriage.